Hello and welcome to the Super Ultra Mega Force Podcast. I'm your host Wyatt.
I'm Bill.
All right, let's talk about some stuff we've been doing and everything. What have you been interested in or been playing?
I'm playing a lot of more Dying Light, but I've actually been playing going back to Knights of the Old Republic.
Yeah, Knights of the Old Republic's pretty fun, from one of those games that we've, enjoyed for years, and I think it's kind of the game that broke both of us into the Bioware series, the Bioware friend.
Definitely, because we both kind of skipped that Baldur's Gate party.
Yeah. I think that was probably one of the first American RPGs that I really got into and really translated well to me. It's probably one of also my favorite Star Wars games of all time.
When was the last time you played it?
I don't think I've played it since maybe a couple years ago when we or probably 5, 6, however long it was when we first had it, and I just beat it all the way through about 1 billion times just because it was so amazing.
It was pretty baller when it came out.
Yeah. I mean, the revelations that you have in it are great. That you find out, spoilers, that you are Darth Revan. I mean, it's kind of years ago, so I think we're okay with kind of spoiling it for people.
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't living in the age we do now, if it's something, even if it's a year past, I mean, I can't really. It's like me in Game of Thrones. I know everything that happens. It's my own fault. It's at this point, it's just there's no point.
There's some things I feel when it comes to spoiling, which is kind of why I'm very lenient on my spoilers here, is that, sometimes when we spoil things, if it's been a long time, some people aren't really interested in the media. A lot of times with us, there's so much new media that comes out that we won't be interested in it, or we don't care about it. I would be okay with hearing what the spoilers are for Hannibal, because Hannibal is, I wasn't into it for a while. Just recently I actually did get into it. But beforehand, if I'd heard something on it, that would actually made me want to see it more,
Yeah.
So
I'm kind of similar in some ways.
Tell me about what your favorite moment was in the KOTOR series, would you say, just to wrap it up on that one.
The one that, it's funny you mentioned that, but probably the scene that stood out the most, and I remember because it was Knights of the Republic 2, mm-hmm. and it's whenever you first get to Nar Shaddaa. And I had Kreia, and I think at this point you don't really have many party members, because I remember Kreia being with me. I think she had to be with you for this, I think. But you walk out of the Ebon Hawk on the docks, and you this beggar asks for money, and of course, being light side, not knowing any better, you're just yeah, sure. Here's some credits. I don't need them. And when's the last time you ever used a shop in Knights of the Old Republic? You remember any time ever buying?
I don't
anything?
Even remember a shop in there. I think. That's the one thing about American RPGs, is that they don't really have very functional shops. They exist in that world, but majority of the time, the best items you find in them are just always found on loot.
Yeah.
So
it is true. It's a pretty big problem.
Yeah, Destiny's like that. If you at some point in that game you realize that everything you need is going to be off of the other things in the game, the vendors are almost pointless.
Just same with Diablo, Borderlands.
Mm-hmm. Borderlands for sure is like that. It's just they follow those tropes.
Yeah, that happens, and she turns to you and kind of chastises you for it, and it's one of the times when I was I figured I was really gonna like it, because she gives her reasoning behind it and basically says that you need to think more about the consequences of your actions. And as she's talking about even the smallest things that you do could have how big it could become, type of deal. But what was interesting is it would have been something if it was just on her face normal, but as she was talking, it played a short scene of him of the guy walking away, going somewhere else, and then getting mugged for the same money that I gave him and getting killed over it. There was more just to kind of not go off topic here, but 2 just overall I felt had more consistent writing. Knights of the Republic 1 is really cool. All this side quest stuff and all those are really good, and the main story is cool too. But the dialogue that you could actually say just seemed more varied. It wasn't always super I'm super Jedi, super good, or I'm super bad. They never really had ones that were kind of in between in the first one. And there was a lot more in 2. That's why I think more enjoyed it, just dialogue wise.
One of the things I have to say about the Old Republic is, or Knights of the Old Republic to be specific, now that there is an Old Republic, Knights of the Old Republic, and Knights of the Old Republic 2, is that Knights of the Old Republic, unlike the other two, is it had the most emotional feel to it. It had the I think it pulled the heartstrings the most out of all the other ones, because you're tied in with this character that you create in the beginning. You meet this cast, you have these characters. Some of them are funny because they're homicidal maniacs. Some of the characters, they feel kind of like Star Warsy characters, and you're like these are my people. This is my crew in like the Star Wars universe. And then they reveal that like one little bit of information to you, and that you realize suddenly that you are actually like this character that's not only that's so important in this part in this story, and it just makes so much sense. There are a lot of characters that you create that really are just the guy that walked in at the wrong time, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. The moments where your team gets captured and it feels very like tight. I remember it feeling these moments where you're like, could my crew die in this moment? Could I lose someone? And then Bastila sacrifices herself. You think that she's gone, and then she's actually turned into the dark side. Just moments like that are really awesome. And the fact that she, in the end, kind of like, or at least on my story, and I know your story too, where like she like professes her like love for you. Mm-hmm. You really like, for me, when I was in high school, I think I was just starting high school when this came out.
High school, yeah.
I really felt a connection, and it was like crazy. That was like the first time, and very few games have really gotten to those points. I don't really feel very many games like where they give me that feel. But some do, and I think that was one of the first that really went, man, this is less a video game and more like an experience. And
it's funny you mention, or you talk about that one scene, because that whole scene where you get captured, you feel like the stakes are pretty high, and you also get to choose you get to choose like who's gonna break you out. So it kind of reminded me of stuff they would do later on down the line, like in Mass Effect 2, when you have like actual stakes, who's gonna do what. But that whole scene on the Leviathan, you finding out what you do, and then everybody's reaction to that is probably the best part of the whole game. I mean, because I don't know if you like to do this, but what you said, because I had a pretty similar experience when I played it. But I really like to role play when I play games, especially if it's easy to get immersed into it. And Knights of the Republic, even now, I'm still able to get into that kind of feel. But yeah, I remember that being, because I mean, at the time, it was, I mean, basically what I'm getting at with this is that I had a very, very much similar experience that didn't like you did.
Yeah. Now, there's one thing I can say about some of those games. I don't feel like a lot more of the other Bioware games really allow you to roleplay as much as you would. And the reason for that is because Shepard feels like he's his own person. He's referenced all the time. That's his name. That's not my name. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess I can somehow mentally kind of think about myself being this guy named Shepard. But sometimes that's a bit different.
Kind of hard.
The character that you were in Old Republic, he had his own name. When he didn't remember who he was. And then eventually you got a name, and you're like, well, that still wasn't even necessarily his name. That was his title, That is something that was, unique about it. I like Dragon Age for that same reason, because Dragon Age, you created your own character, yeah. And it was cool for him to be like this, he had some backstory, which could feel like someone else, like your backstory, that kind of thing. But of course, these stories, 3 installments in Dragon Age, and they're all referenced in that third game, and it's kind of weird to think about it. It's like, oh, here's me, from this one story, here's me from another story, and here's me from another story. They're all like in this different form. So I think that's a little weird. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, Hawk is kind of the same way Shepard is, where he's supposed to be his own guy, and like he looks almost like he can be more of an iconic character than he can be like you. Like they don't describe him as you; they describe him as Hawk.
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
I think a lot of that has to do with just the way they've approached their RPG dialogue elements. Like, it's a lot easier to immerse yourself in Knights 1, the first Dragon Age, because there's no character speaking for you. There's lines of dialogue, exactly what you're going to say. You can choose the one that feels the most natural for you. And with the dialogue wheel for Mass Effect and Dragon Age 2, and from then on, it's more like it's almost like you're guiding your character. You're not being the character, if that makes any sense. And it kind of creates a little bit of a disconnect. I felt like Inquisition actually does a surprising job with immersion, because technically your character, I think, I'm sure has a name, but they all refer to him as the Inquisitor. And you can be like, well, that's who I am. That type of thing. It's easy. I feel like so far, like I've had more. I was able to get more immersed into Inquisition than I thought I was going to, and I was actually surprised by that.
Now, if you're a human, don't you have like a backstory that they actually mention? I think, aren't you part of the Trevelyan or Trevelyan?
Yeah, something like that.
I think that's a cool name. Like the Kuzlins one from the first Dragon Age was a favorite kind of idea. I mean, especially because when you meet those characters, I swear I think your mom is one of the characters, and she like gets battle armor in that first prologue, and she actually fights. So you're like, man, like my family's a bunch of rich badasses. This is pretty cool. And of course they all die. So tragic, but you do get to have your dog though.
Hey, hero's journey, man.
Yeah, so
hero's journey.
But yeah, I think that's a good topic for Bioware.
Whoa, man, I can't believe you just did that.
Oh no, it's Bio stuff. Oh my gosh. But yeah, if you're interested in more of this stuff, check out Super Mega Ultra Force podcast here on the Super Mega Ultra Force channel. Thanks.